everyone. How are you doing? Doing well? Yeah, good. Great. My name is Erica Swallow. I'm an associate editor of partner content at Mashable, and it's my distinct pleasure to introduce Rohit Bhargava. He is the SVP of Global Strategy and Marketing at Ogilvy, and he is a founding member of the Ogilvy 360 Digital Influence Team, the world's largest global network of social media strategists. He is also an adjunct professor of global marketing at Georgetown University and author of the best-selling book, Personality Not Included, a guide on how to use personality to reinvent your marketing. The book has been published globally in 8 languages. I'm happy to announce today, for the first time publicly, that Rohit just signed a contract with Wiley for his second book called Likeonomics. It'll be a guide on what makes people, ideas, and organizations believable. It will be released in early 2012, but you'll be getting a preview here today, as that's the topic he'll be talking about, and you can visit likeonomics.com for a sneak preview as well. Rohit has spoken at TEDx and has been featured on the covers of Marketing China and PR Week UK, as well as interviewed as a marketing expert for NPR, Business Week, and Fast Company. His personal blog, Influence Marketing, is ranked among the top 25 marketing blogs in the world. Please join me in welcoming Rohit Bhargava to the stage.
Thanks. Yeah. Here we go. Okay. Whoops. All right. Now that I know where the screens are, I'm distinctly aware that I'm standing between you and lunch, and also that I have a clock here that will apparently turn all sorts of rainbow colors. They warn me as I get close to my time, so I'll stick to it, I promise. I don't have that many slides, but I do have an idea that's sort of been gnawing at me, and anybody who's in the field of marketing or public relations, I think, will relate to this. So can you raise your hand if you work in any sort of marketing or PR-oriented role? Okay, so more than half the room. So I don't know if you've noticed this as much as I have, but we have a pretty big problem collectively. And our big problem collectively is that people don't believe us the way that they used to. And this problem is sort of eating at everything that we do. We saw it just recently with the breaking news about Facebook versus Google that several people have mentioned on stage. But this is sort of one of those moments where you see that come out, and the average consumer, right, not people like us in the industry, sort of think in the back of their minds, well, that's one example, but that's just one example where they got caught. Because we know that this sort of stuff, this backhanded dealing, is happening all the time. And so as I started thinking about this, probably about a year ago, this idea was sort of eating away at me. And I thought, well, where did this start? And so I started to do some research, and I started to think about it. And one of the places where I ended up was with the story of John D. Rockefeller, who was, by some accounts, the world's richest man at the time when he was the richest man, but also by today's standards, if you convert it with inflation and all sorts of stuff that economists do. And he was super, super rich because he owned certain industries, right? He had a lot of different properties and things that he had developed, but he also had a bit of a reputation problem, as many billionaires have. And his reputation problem was that people kind of felt like he was a little bit greedy, right? He kind of looked after himself. He was sort of a cranky old guy, which is sort of what he looks like in this picture, right? And this reputation sort of hit a crisis moment in 1914. Because in 1914, in a town called Ludlow, what happened was what now history books call the Ludlow Massacre. And the Ludlow Massacre was this moment when coal miners decided that they were being mistreated. And at that time, unions didn't really exist. And so what they decided to do was all picket together and go on strike. And Rockefeller, as the legend goes, talked to the National Guard in the area. The National Guard came in. It ended up turning into a gunfight. And 19 coal miners, including their families, some members of their families and children and women, were shot and were killed. And this was a moment in American history where people started to think of this idea of workers' rights in a much more serious way. And many historians count on the Ludlow Massacre being the moment when unions started to be formed and some legislation started to get passed for that to happen. So right around the time when this happened, Rockefeller, suffering from a reputational crisis, then had the massacre happen, and all of a sudden, the Rockefeller family was at an all-time low. And so they went out and they tried to find a consultant, somebody who could help them. And this guy, some of you who studied PR might recognize, his name's Ivy Ledbetter Lee, and that's sort of what he looks like. And he's what a lot of people call the father of modern public relations. He invented the first press release, as his Wikipedia page says, perhaps written by some descendants, but he was a sort of masterful PR consultant, and he was a superstar in his day because he started to talk about the idea that advertising wasn't the only way of getting messages out there, that as a PR person, you could impact what the people thought by going directly to the media and influencing the stories that they wrote. So third-party communications, which in that time was a really big idea. And so he looked at the Rockefeller family and John D. Rockefeller's problem, and he said, you know what? You need to humanize what you're doing. So he suggested to John D. Rockefeller that he go out and hand out dimes to everybody that he met on the street. And by doing so, he would turn from a cranky old man who only held on to his money to a magnanimous, kind of rich guy who was sharing the wealth with everybody through dimes, which adjusted for inflation probably equates to about maybe $2 today, giving out. So imagine a millionaire goes out and they just give $2 to anybody they see on the street. But this image was recorded through history, through photos, through media reports, and that became the image that people saw of John D. Rockefeller as this kindly old man handing dimes to babies. So fast forward from then to today. Now today, you've got lots of people handing out their own dimes. You've got the PR spin person talking about how toxic sludge is actually good for you, by the way. You've got Trump talking about birth certificates and people not being born in certain places. You've got Enron distrusting and American consumers sort of feeling that distrust. Airborne as a medication that had been sold for the longest time, then had legislation a couple of years ago that showed that it was basically a vitamin and nothing more. And Dr. Atkins, right? How many people went on the low-carb diet at some point? You might still believe in it. I'm not trying to challenge your dietary religion beliefs. But you know, there's a lot of stuff like this out there. And of course, we have everybody's favorite rock band ever, although I think rock band might be a little bit of a stretch for Milli Vanilli. But they could reach superstardom, and yes, they were found out, and many things like this aren't found out. But now I'd like to fast forward to today, and an example of a modern musician, and I'm going to play a short clip, and then I'm going to talk about who this is.
Should we explain that the spots are from your bed?
Hi, YouTubers. These spots are from Carmen's bed.
Well,
Again!
just leave it there. Just leave it there.
Oh, yeah, I
Need to go then. Okay. Let's try. Don't hear me laugh. Now I remember why I never record videos with you. Put on my blue suede shoes and I boarded the plane. Touchdown in the land of the Delta Blues, in the middle of the pouring rain. WC Handy, won't you look down over me? Yeah, I got a first class ticket, but I'm as blue as a boy can be. And I'm walking to Memphis, hey, yeah. Walking with my feet 10 feet off me. Walking to Memphis, oh yeah. Do I really feel the way I feel?
Okay, so that musician's name is Anna Free, and that video was recorded 3 years ago. Now, Anna Free is kind of an interesting example. She's a Portuguese singer, and she records these videos that sort of started in either her bedroom or at various locations wherever she was with her friends. And she started posting them on YouTube, and people started watching them, and they started sharing them with her friends. And so she kept doing it. And now it's been 4 years since she's had this YouTube account. She is the 18th most subscribed musician in the UK on YouTube. She has more than 70,000 subscribers. Her videos have been watched more than 27 million times. And it's a combination of cover songs like that one, Walkin' in Memphis, which wasn't her original song, but also original songs. And in November of 2010, thanks to her YouTube popularity, she was invited to be the opening act for Shakira in Brazil. So here's a different example, because all of these videos are sort of like this one. I mean, she's gotten a little bit more professional. The sound's gotten better. This was 3 years ago. But essentially, it's her kind of screwing up, and you get to see outtakes. And you get this really natural sense of who she is as a musician. And as a fan, you feel like you understand her process and her journey and that you've been part of it. So that leads me to this idea that I've been thinking about for some time and that I wanted to share today, which is Likeonomics. And Likeonomics is an attempt to try and explain what's happening today. Why is it that stars like Anna Free now exist and reach super stardom, maybe starting on YouTube, but then eventually moving out to what anyone might call mainstream? Opening for Shakira is pretty mainstream as far as a musician goes. And why do we believe these people more? Why do we buy from these people when it comes to products and brands and services? And why do we get inspired by them when it comes to movements, cause-related movements and nonprofit movements? So when you think about it, there's a couple of core elements here, and I wanted to share a few examples of that, and then I'm going to end and get everybody on their way to lunch. I think I'm doing well on time, so everything's working well. Likeonomics is simple, and a lot of what we counsel, if many of us in the room, I know when I forgot the lady's name before, but the pew 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 lady, when she was walking around this morning and asking people what they did, a lot of people said social media consultants, right? And a lot of social media consultants, and sometimes I'll put myself in the same category, right? We're often ridiculed, but our advice comes down to things like this, right? Don't be a dick. Now, we all have an emotional reaction to what that means, but it's a very simple concept. It's be genuine, be honest, be open, and that's sort of powered the social media revolution. And it's powered to a large degree why we're all here because of Mashable, because Mashable's been a brand that's really kind of risen through that. And I guarantee you that unlike many other conferences, if you're a frequent visitor of conferences, I guarantee you most of the people in this room know more people from Mashable, the organizing group for this conference, than they probably do at any other conference that they go to, organized by another large group. And that's a testament to this idea that it's simple, it's personal relationships. The flip camera took off. I know we're all still in shock about not having our flip cameras anymore if you're a big flip fan, but it was a super simple product. One button, plug it into the USB, you could upload video. You didn't need to be a video genius or have crazy software in order to do it. Big deal. Ally Bank, another great example of that. It's a bank that allows you to sort of get a fairer way of banking. They had this great TV ad. I don't know if anybody saw it, but it was basically two little girls. And the guy from Ally Bank was going out and he was doing what we in marketing call a promotion. And one little girl was already banking with them, and he said, well, here you go, here are some crayons. That's your promotion. And then a new little girl came along, and she said, well, I'm new, I want a pony. And so he brings out the pony, and he says, here you go. And the first little girl, who was already a customer, says, hey, that's no fair, right? If you have kids, you've heard this, no fair, right? That's no fair. He says, well, sorry, she's a new customer. And that's sort of how we're treating our new customers versus our existing customers, and it's not fair. And Likeonomics is meant to kind of get back to the simplicity. It's also human. So anyone familiar with Innocent Drinks, which is a European brand? Maybe the German guys from before know it because it's all over Europe. But it's essentially a company that makes smoothies. So not that dissimilar from other products. Yes, their products are very genuine and they're great. But they do a lot of things to illustrate this humanity behind the business. They invite their customers in. And during the winter months, they have these little caps that they put on top of their bottles. And when you walk into a Sainsbury or any of the grocery stores in the UK, you'll see that these little caps are on the bottle tops. And the reason for these caps is that it's a charity thing. They work with a charity group called Age Concern, which is elderly people. Often they're homeless. And they knit these little caps that they put onto the bottles, and you pay a little bit extra, and the extra goes towards that charity, and you get this little cap on top of your bottle. So here's a company that's living up to what they're saying, but they're also doing it in a way that if you sell any sort of retail product on shelf, you know that a bottle with a little hat on it is going to stand out against another bottle that doesn't have a hat on it. So a brilliant marketing campaign at the same time. The first speaker of the day gentleman from EuroRCG mentioned this example of Domino's Pizza and this idea of not just honesty and not just transparency, but brutal honesty and extreme transparency. And that's really what gets people over that hump of, I don't believe you. I don't trust that what you're doing is anything more than spin. When it comes out to this level, and you say, you know what? Our pizza did taste like cardboard, and damn it, we're sorry about it, and we're going to fix it. That is brutal honesty, and that's not just, you know what? We're doing crappy stuff, but at least we're open about it, and we put it in our annual report, so it's fine. We disclosed it, right? Disclosure is not the same thing as honesty. And this last example I just had to include because I had the pleasure earlier this week of being in Oslo and going to a very unique place, which was marketed as the world's first miniature bottle museum. So if you've ever gotten those little bottles of liquor at sort of airplanes mostly, or other places, not that I drink those on airplanes all the time, but this guy essentially said, I have this huge collection and I'm going to create an entire museum around it. So Christian Ringis, I think is how you pronounce his name, eccentric millionaire. He creates an entire museum around it, and you can go to the museum and you can see all these different things. But he treats the museum with a great sense of humor because he realizes that he's built an entire museum around something that most people who might think of visiting consider silly, or at least strange. And so he's got all of these ways that he kind of markets it and promotes it and doesn't take himself too seriously. And because of that, we have this emotional connection because it's not an eccentric millionaire just saying, you know what, I have the money so I can just do whatever I want and screw everybody else, which he certainly could do. But instead he's saying, you know what, I'm going to treat myself with a bit of a sense of humor. And yes, I love these bottles and it's my personal passion, but because I'm emotional about it, maybe I'll get you to be emotionally invested in it too. So the last point that I'll leave you with as we move into Q&A and lunch and I stick to my time is that this currency that's powering the Likeonomics economy isn't made of paper anymore. It's made of all of the relationships that we have and the affinity that we share. And that, I think, is what's going to start dramatically impacting how we interact with each other and the messages that people believe or don't believe in the future. So thank you.
All right, so start lining up at the microphones for questions, but I'll start you off with one. I'm really interested in the type of research you went through in putting this all together.
Yeah, well, I think one of the big things that I started seeing over and over again, and I'm a big, I wouldn't call it a collection, but I'm a big reader of just lots of different books, and I have just shelves and shelves of them, because I think if you're going to write a book, the first thing you should do is just go out and buy a ton of them. And buy them because you're helping other authors too. But one of the things that kept coming out over and over again was that people make decisions emotionally and not rationally. That's the entire point of Predictably Irrational. That's sort of the point of Blink. That's sort of the point of Sway. Over and over again, there's research after research after research that all talks about this. And yet, when we go into marketing meetings, as an agency guy, I have these marketing meetings with lots of CMOs, and everybody has a spreadsheet. And show me the column on the spreadsheet for passion. Right? Show me the column on the spreadsheet that captures that. And so there's this disconnect between what we know is working. Like if you're in a small business and you know that you're selling products to parents, and you know that you have a chance to have lunch with the president of the PTA, a really powerful PTA, you know that that's going to result in something coming back to your business. But where do you put that in a spreadsheet? And so that's this kind of disconnect that I was trying to uncover and write about. And I think there's plenty of research that talks about the fact that it exists. Mm-hmm. There's not a lot of solutions for how to fix it.
Definitely, makes sense. We have about time for 2 questions. So audience, questions? Oh, great.
Hi, how are you?
Hi, good, thanks.
Jody Fisher with Rubenstein Communications in New York. From one PR person to another, we talk with clients all the time, and I love the definition, sort of being open, being honest, being human is what I always tell people. Have you seen, because I think I have, and I'm interested to hear your point of view, have you seen a theme from people you work with, clients that you advise, who don't get it? And is there a theme throughout why they don't get it, and how do you try to bust through that wall?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that there certainly is a theme for why a lot of companies don't get it. And I think that a part of the theme relates to taking away the individual part of a message. So when I write something on behalf of a brand, I never say, I think this. I never say, I work for such and such, and I say this. I try and talk from the brand. And so as soon as you take the personal element out of it, you're all of a sudden making it this kind of marketing speak. I think that's one thing. I think the other thing is that, I mean, as a writer, I can say that it's a lot easier to write in marketing speak and not say anything and write pointless mission statements. I mean, I can churn out 12 of those an hour. It's a lot more difficult to actually say something substantial. And so I think that part of it is just the ease. I mean, the fact of the matter is that a lot of people don't necessarily want to work that hard. Because it's hard.
Well, we actually are just out of time, so if you have more questions, Rohit will be here for the entire conference throughout tomorrow, so find him and ask him anything you're interested in hearing. Thank you so much for coming to speak with us.